everybody, welcome to another Spectrum Economics video. Today I'm going to be covering cost-benefit analysis again, and I'm actually going to go back to a journal article I published back in, what is this now, 2012 in this journal here, the Transportation Journal. This is published by Penn State. And I'm going to include this as part of my cost-benefit analysis series and also part of my conference series. I never actually presented this paper at a conference, but I initially proposed, I think it was back, or might have been back in 2010 for the ATRF. Unfortunately didn't get into that paper, into that conference that year, but instead I put it up to go into a journal, and yeah, the Transportation Journal accepted it. So today I'm going to present this as a video, just to explain what I mean by decision criteria, in terms of what decision criteria was used back then and still mostly used today, and what alternative cost-benefit analysis decision criteria I'm actually proposing now. Alright, so what do I mean by decision criteria? Okay, so there's a number of different decision criteria out there that are used, and they're mostly used to determine whether a project in cost-benefit analysis is economically viable, and also potentially can be used for ranking and even for project timing. So I'm going to quickly just go over a number of decision criteria, or should I say decision measures, or economic measures, should we call them, cost-benefit analysis economic measures. Okay, so let's start with the net present value. That is, it's basically comparing your discounted benefits with your discounted costs, and the difference is actually your net present value. There's also the benefit cost ratio, so that is your discounted benefits divided by your discounted costs. So in order for your project to be viable, your benefits need to be greater than your costs. So therefore your benefit cost ratio needs to be greater than 1. Then we've got the internal rate of return. That in effect is your discount rate where your net present value equals to 0. So that will tell you what your discount rate will be when, so for example, so a higher internal rate of return is actually generally considered good. So for example, if you're using a discount rate, typically let's say 7%, and your internal rate of return is 12%, that indicates your project is economically viable. There's also the net benefit investment ratio. I'm going to cover that off a little bit later, go into a bit more detail what I mean by that. There's also the payback period. This is more for financial analysis, but this is the number of years it takes for you to actually pay back your initial layout, your initial costs. So for example, just basically something costs 10 million and you're getting exactly 1 million back each year, so your payback period will be 10 years. First year rate of return. So this is used to determine your optimal timing. So that compares your return in your first year compared to what you could be earning elsewhere on alternative. And you generally compare that with your discount rate. So if your discount rate is 7% and you're getting a return of 12% in your first year, that's an indication that maybe your project should go ahead. If it's less, then it may indicate you want to delay. And I've also got incremental benefit cost ratio and incremental net benefit investment ratio. So what these are is basically it's a comparison between two options. So you'd have the more expensive option and you'd have the lower cost option. So the difference in the cost between the two options, it will be compared with the difference in the benefits. So if your incremental benefits are greater than your incremental costs, that would indicate that the more expensive or higher cost option is probably a better choice. Alright, so what are we going to be looking at today? So I'm going to be talking about, first of all, what was proposed by the Australian Transport Council back in 2006. I think it's more or less the same, maybe a little bit different in terms of first year rate of return now. But anyway, so we've got the benefit cost ratio, and this is used to rank projects as it's recommended. So if you've got 10 projects, so you'd rank them according to the highest benefit cost ratio. So let's say you've got a benefit cost ratio of 6, it's greater than the benefit cost ratio of 4. So the project with a benefit cost ratio of 6 would be prioritized basically in terms of a ranking. It's also used to determine viability. So as I mentioned before, you need a benefit cost ratio of greater than 1, indicate that your project is economically viable. Also, they've got the net present value. That again is to determine economic viability. So you have a ratio greater than, you have a net present value greater than 0, would indicate that you've got a positive return to society from that investment. And also, it's what I'll be talking about a little bit later on as well, It can be used to rank options within, say you may have several project options. So it's generally recommended by these guidelines that you rank options by net present value rather than by benefit cost ratio. And this is mutually exclusive options we're generally talking about. So these are options that I guess you can only have one or the other. You can't have both options. They would call those two separate projects, but in this case it's, mutually exclusive options. And the first rate of return, that is what I mentioned before, determines your start year, basically. Okay, so what is the benefit cost ratio? Just quickly here we've got the formula. So as I mentioned earlier, it's discounted benefits divided by discounted costs. It sounds fairly simple. There are some variations that could create a bit of confusion when we talk about operating costs, but for this sake of this presentation, we'll just simply say it's discounted benefits by discounted costs. Alright, and this is where I have a bit of a problem in terms of using the benefit cost ratio, and I think in a sense it could be flawed. It depends on, well, the usage anyway. It depends on where your benefits are coming from. This is what we mentioned about operating costs. So let's take, you got these two projects. So both of them have got a capital expenditure of 100 million, and they both have, well, one has benefits of 150 million, the other has benefits of 200 million. But the project with the $200 million worth of benefits has no improvement or reduction in operating costs, whereas the other project has a 50 million reduction in operating costs. So in a sense, your benefits plus your savings in operating costs actually equals the same as the other project's all-out benefits, if you know what I mean? And when we talk about benefits, I think most of the time we're talking about benefits to users, whereas operating costs is actually benefits to the organisation in terms of the cash flow and the money going out. So both projects will get a net present value of 100 million, but the project with the reduction in operating costs gets a benefit cost ratio of 3 compared to the other project that's got a benefit cost ratio of 2. So you can see, even though they seem to be almost identical in terms of savings, one has a higher benefit cost ratio than the other one. And this gets even more complicated for projects that create really, really high operating cost savings that maybe over a 10-20 year period, those operating cost savings actually exceed capital. And then with your benefit cost ratio, you'd actually have a negative denominator in the sense that these savings are bigger. So you minus them off the capital costs, you'll be dividing your benefits by a negative number and therefore getting a negative benefit cost ratio. Some may argue that this is uncommon, but I found in personal experience there's quite a few projects out there that actually have quite significant maintenance cost savings. So whereas, as I explain later, I talk about the net benefit investment ratio doesn't seem to have the same problem. Alright, let's just take a look at the net present value, and I'll look at it in terms of option selection. So as you see we've got here, so we've got option 1A and 1B. So if you're looking at net present value, you would actually say option 1A is actually preferred to 1B. Because what option 1A has a net present value of 80 million, or 800,000, I think I've got it down here. Okay, we'll just call it 800,000, and option 1B has a net present value of 60,000. Therefore, option 1A, based on the ATC, would be preferred. And in terms of benefit cost ratio, it actually has a lower benefit cost ratio, 1.67, compared to option 1B that's got a benefit cost ratio of 2. So how does this create a problem? Well, imagine that after you've gone through the selection process of options, then the selected project then needs to compete with several other projects. In this case, we've got 2 other projects there. We're going to call them Project 2 and Project 3. So what happens if we go with 1A, and let's say our budget is just 120,000? So that means Project 1A would then not be selected, unfortunately, and Projects 2 and 3 would be selected instead. So what would happen then? So you've eliminated 1B when you did the options analysis, and then you got 1A, and then 1A gets eliminated because there isn't enough money. So what happens is the 120,000 now goes to Project 2 and 3, and that gives us a total net present value of 98,000, I believe. Correct. So, is this an optimal solution? Not exactly. Because if we'd gone with option 1B, you would have got a net present value of 60,000. And then we would have gone with option 2 over option 3, gives us a net present value of 50,000. So you would have had option 1B and you would have had project 2. And that would have given us a net present value of 110,000. So actually you're getting an extra $12,000 worth of benefits, or $12,000 higher net present value. And that is if we're ranking, assuming we're ranking by benefit cost ratio. So you have 1B first, option 2, project 2 second. Whereas if you'd gone with option 1A, that actually had the lowest BCR, would have been ranked below 2 with 1.83 and also below 3 at 1.8. So selecting the net present value in this scenario does not give you the optimal solution in terms of you looking at a broader program, for example. Okay, let's got another scenario here. And this is, imagine that the benefits of projects 2 and 3 are now lower. So now their net present values have dropped to 10,000 and 5,000 respectively, and their BCRs are much lower, just over 1. So in this case, selecting 1A is actually the better option, because now you're going to get a net present value of 80,000, whereas if you'd gone with 1B, you would have got a net present value of 60,000, plus you would have gone with project 2, which would give you a net present value of 10,000, and only giving you a net present value of 70,000. So as you can see here, it all depends on what is happening with your other projects, which is interesting enough that you can't just look at your projects in isolation. And this is a good example of why program evaluation is actually so important. As you've seen from some of my other videos, I talk about program evaluation quite a bit. But in the context of this, I'm trying to find a way we can actually use indicators to maybe help us out if we don't have that direct relationship. And I'll explain a little bit later how you can use the incremental net benefit ratio to actually give you a better answer. Next economic measure we're going to look at is first year rate of return. So I've never been a fan of that. I think most people aren't a fan of it, and I don't think it's really recommended anymore. But I'm just going to cover this quite quickly. And there's a few areas where it's got a bit of a weakness. First of all is it only looks at the first year benefits. So, and this isn't so bad if we're looking at what we call monotonically increasing benefits, so benefits are increasing every single year they're going up. But in reality, you may not get a project that's got that, and your benefits could be fluctuating a little bit. And by just looking at the 1 year in isolation doesn't give you that broader perspective of some of your other years within that early period of how the benefits are going. So that's a bit of a problem. Next problem is that you're looking at a project that's got an infinite life, and most projects don't. In transport, I think we're looking at about 30 years, which is quite long, less of a problem. If you look at IT projects, maybe you look at 5 to 10 years, and it's far from infinity, so that is quite a problem. And what the problem is there is you delay something, then you may get benefits later on that are not included. You know what I mean? And the first year rate of return doesn't look at those later years. And also as well, and this is probably a problem with a lot of indicators in terms of project timing anyway, is you need to have flexible start dates. So if your first year rate of return says you start 2 years from now, and then you need to have that flexibility to do that. And if it's part of a program and all that, and it's been ranked accordingly, then that could mess up your whole rankings within your program, and you may not have that flexibility. Alright, so I'm going to look at a number of indicators that I'm proposing to actually replace your benefit cost ratio, your net present value, and your first year rate of return. First one I've got is your net benefit investment ratio, which is actually quite similar to your benefit cost ratio. And I think there's guidelines that even define them very, very similarly as well, depending on where you move your operating costs. So your net benefit investment ratio, in short, is your discounted net benefits over your discounted capital costs. So basically, in the denominator, you're only looking at capital costs. You don't have to worry about anything else. This is just your initial outlay, and that is just your capital costs. Whereas in your numerator, you're actually going to be looking at your benefits to the users, as well as any reductions in your operating costs, or even any increase in your operating costs. So if your operating costs increase, for example, you'd actually deduct that from your benefits. So it's just looking basically everything else other than capital costs, you might say. That's why it's a net. Alright, so how does this resolve our problem? Well, so go back to the example. We're going to use net benefit investment ratio instead of benefit cost ratio for the problem I talked about earlier. So we have the same capital, you got your 100 million, and you've got your benefits for one option, for one project, and that's 150 million, and the other one is 200 million. And you've got these operating cost savings of 50 million. And both of them produce a net present value of 100 million, and the net benefit investment ratio is actually 2 for both of those. Because what happens is you get your 150 million plus your 50 million savings and operating costs. This gives you 200 million, and you divide it by the 100 million, giving you an answer of 2. Whereas previously what you would have had is when you had your 150 million divided by 100 minus the 50, that's being your savings. So you'd end up with 150 divided by 50, and that would have given you your 3. And also you don't get problems in negative values because you won't get negative capital costs. You don't have to have the problem of worrying about if your operating costs are too high and stuff like that. And even if you don't get negative costs, you get a situation where your costs are exceedingly low and you get very, very high benefit cost ratios, which is not really useful for anything, especially if you're looking at projects within a program. All right, next indicator I'm going to have a look at is the incremental net benefit investment ratio. So this is quite interesting and it's quite simple to explain. So you get your discounted net benefits of your more expensive or your higher cost project, and you minus off your discounted net benefits of your lower cost project. So you get that difference, and then you divide it by the difference in the capital costs. So you get the capital cost of the higher cost project minus it off from the lower cost project. And if your incremental net benefit investment ratio is above a certain number, so let's say for argument's sake it's above 1, and then that would indicate that that option, well, your higher cost option, should I say, is actually the preferred option. If it is below 1, and that would indicate your lower cost option is probably preferred, because your incremental net benefit is not greater than your incremental capital cost. So for it to be your option to be better, it needs to be higher. But I've used just 1 in this case, and I'm going to talk about how that doesn't always follow through either. Okay, so let's go back to our scenario now, going back to our NPV scenario. I'm going to put incremental benefit investment ratio in there instead. So as you can see, so we've got net present value of 80,000 for option 1A and 60,000 for option 1B. So let's have a look at our discounted benefits. So 1A has 80,000 more benefits and it costs 60,000 more. So that gives us an incremental benefit investment ratio of 1.33. And now we can take that and we can compare it with our other projects. And how does that stack up? As you can see, it's actually lower than, what is it, project 2 and project 3. So, and because of that, that indicates that maybe we should go with option 1B, the lower cost option, because those additional benefits from that higher expenditure on your higher cost option doesn't exceed the cost of doesn't exceed the net benefit, net benefit investment ratio of your, so if you get what I mean, so the additional benefit is just 80,000, correct? For that extra 60,000, whereas your other options are getting 110,000, other projects are getting benefits of 110,000 and 108,000 respectively, and because that's lower, you'd actually go with the lower cost option 1B. So if you go with 1B, what do you get? So you get a net present value of 60,000, and then you still got 60,000 more to spend. Then you would go with project 2 over project 3, and that gives you your net present value of 110,000 for your program. So as you can see here, you compare your incremental net benefit investment ratio with your other options net benefit investment ratio. In a sense, that becomes your cutoff. So in this case, because there's only 60,000 left, so that makes your project 2 would be like your incremental project. That is the one you need to get over the line. And apparently, yeah, 1.33 is less than 1.83. So what about in our scenario 2? So now we've got project 2 and project 3, and then net present values are now only 10,000 and 5,000 respectively. So, and also the net benefit investment ratios are 1.17 and 1.08. So those extra benefits give us an incremental net benefit investment ratio still of 1.33, but this time 1.33 is actually greater than project 2, which has a net benefit investment ratio of 1.17. So what happens here? So you'd go with option 1A, and you get a net present value of 80,000. And this is what we would have got if we were selecting using net present value. Compared to if we'd gone with 1B, we'd have only got a net present value of 70,000. So again, I'm talking on the lines of, imagine this is part of a program in a sense that first you do your options analysis and then you compare with other projects within the program. So rather than going from net present value to then benefit cost ratio or even net present value to net benefit investment ratio, I'm saying keep it in terms of just using your net benefit investment ratio and also your incremental. We start with your incremental, you're comparing options and then you compare it with your projects that you're going to be competing with within the program, assuming that the program doesn't have sufficient funds to actually fund all the projects. So you've got to select which projects. So it's overall, you're looking at maximizing your net present value for the entire program. And that's where I think net present value has its most value, is in calculating the net of an entire program rather than focusing on individual projects. Okay, how about optimal timing? And this is an interesting one as well. And they use first year rate of return. I don't really like it. What I've got here is internal rate of return. And this is quite a unique approach that we've got here. And what's very interesting is about internal rate of return is that it favors benefits that are much earlier within the project. And so if you have your benefits very, very early in your project, you could get a very high internal rate of return. Whereas at the end, you're going to have a far less. Because imagine all your benefits at the end, so you're applying a discount rate, and the discount rate has a very strong impact on your benefits later on. As you can see from this graph here, so you compare your discount rate and you compare it with your internal rate of return. So internal rate of return is in your net present value is 0. And you can see area B, that's where your benefits are actually coming from. So you can see the benefits are appearing a lot later on. Those benefits there is because of the lower discount rate, because the discount rate would assume to be lower than your internal rate of return if you have a positive net present value. And those will get penalized using the internal rate of return. So anyway, I've got an example here just to demonstrate what my point is. So I've got project A, B, C, and D. As you can see, the net benefit investment ratios are all the same. So how do you determine which one should be delayed? If you use your first year rate of return, I think what have we got here? First year rate of return would tell us that project D would be delayed because you're focusing on just the 1 year. But if you use your internal rate of return, it actually gives you an answer of project A. So is project A better than for project D? All you have to look at is your difference in net present value by delay. And if you delay project A, your net present value by 1 year. So you delay project A by 1 year, you got an increase in net present value of what, over 19 million. Whereas for project D, it's only 13 million. Because what happens here is that because of the focus all within the first year, then project D's benefits start to increase later on. And whereas you've got project A, which gives you a fairly good return, doesn't it, in year 1? But then it sort of flattens out a little bit, and then you've got that higher return at the end that you're kind of missing out on by performing too early. So it captures benefits differently, and as you can see, this is only a 13-year evaluation period. So I think if you've got the shorter evaluation periods, internal rate of return, using that as an indicator of timing is going to be a lot more useful than first-year rate of return. If the evaluation periods are very, very long, then maybe first-year rate of return may not be such a bad approach, but I think internal rate of return is fairly flexible in regards to that, and it also factors in all the years of benefits and costs and not just the one. So how about using net benefit investment ratio at the program level? As I mentioned before, it's very good to use that in terms of ranking, and also as well, you can actually use your net benefit investment ratio as your benchmark. So you could use, for example, your lowest project as you mentioned before, it was project 2, wasn't it, or project 3. And that net benefit investment ratio can actually be your benchmark for what you're comparing other net benefit investment ratios with. So for example, if your worst project has a net benefit investment ratio of 1.8, then in effect that is the benchmark that all other projects need to get above. And that is, I think it's quite useful. And eventually over time, assuming we got our discount rates correct, you'll probably be looking at a net benefit investment ratio of somewhere around 1 eventually, because all of your good projects will keep getting built and built and built, and the projects that come through later on are going to have lower and lower net benefit investment ratios until eventually you get down to 1, and eventually you wouldn't need to fund as many projects because your good projects are all getting up. Alright, so this is just a quick summary of the roles I proposed for these new economic measures. So let's take a look at your net benefit investment ratio. So I'm thinking that that can be used for prioritization purpose within programs, and also it can also be used within programs as well, potentially for your marginal project as your cutoff net benefit investment ratio, or your benchmark, should we call it. Incremental net benefit investment ratio for options analysis, and that would then be used and compared with your net benefit investment ratio, again, of the projects that are considered fairly marginal. Your internal rate of return, I'd use that as a way of determining your optimal timing. The paper actually explains it a little bit better than what I can do within this video, so it's worth going back and looking into that, and I'll provide that within the link. The net present value, I'm not taking that out completely. I still like it in terms of looking at your total value out of a project, or more particularly out of a program. So you add up all of your net present values of your projects, and ideally you want to get the highest number for your net present value for your entire program, so I can still see value within that. Alright, so here I've got an example. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. One is using ranking using your benefit cost ratio, which is the current method, and the other is using ranking using your net benefit investment ratio. You just have a quick look at what it's got down there. I'm not going to hold on for too long. Maybe you can pause it and just have a look at what we're getting. But anyway, if you work it all the way through, so it's got a number of different options in there and a number of different projects. So from project 1 down to project 8, and all of them got various options, and they're all being selected using that. I think there should be incremental net benefit ratio in there as well to determine. But anyway, so what is our total? So we compare for a program, and we want to maximize our net present value. So net present value using the current ATC method, that gives us about 1,556, or I think that's 1.5 billion, isn't that? Depending what the units are. And whereas using the proposed method, we're actually getting a little bit higher number. So we're getting 1,594 compared to 1,556. So that is an extra 40 million. Just in this example anyway, or 1,000, depending on what the units I've got down there. But yeah, that is just so you can see you're actually getting more value using the methods proposed in this paper than actually using what's currently in the ATC. But that was just an example. You'd actually probably need to look into some real case studies, some real programs, and then actually make comparisons. And at that point in time, we didn't really have some good examples of programs that were using benefit cost ratios and net benefit investment ratios. But as time has gone on, I've been involved with a number of programs. There's the Warrego Highway Upgrade and the Bruce Highway Action Plan. So that would be good ones to actually take out and have a look. If you've got another paper on the Bruce Highway Action Plan, it's got some interesting stuff around program stuff and all that as well. But in conclusion anyway, I think we've got these benefit cost ratio, and it's something that people grab onto. But I think we need to have a new way of thinking, and I think we need to move more to your net benefit investment ratio, and especially with confusion around the definition of benefit cost ratio in regards to where those operating costs go. Or if you're just sticking with the traditional definition with benefits divided by costs, then you're going to have problems when you have high operating cost savings. And also as well, you get inconsistencies when we talk about net present value compared to, so use net present value for your options, and then use benefit cost ratio of ranking projects within programs. And that some inconsistency there can create some problems. So I'm suggesting using an incremental net benefit investment ratio, and then following that through by using a net benefit investment ratio. So, and then you can make those comparisons because you are still comparing ratios with each other. But anyway, this takes us to the end of my conference paper, and this I think takes me to the end as well of my journal paper, and takes me to the end of my conference series as well. This is part of this, and this is also part of my cost benefit analysis series. So if you enjoyed this video, click the like button, and if you want to see more videos like this, on cost benefit analysis that would be, and I've still got a few more I'm going to be putting up, hit the subscribe button. I've also got some other videos I'm going to be coming out with as well in relation to game theory, in relation to social impact evaluation, and also another area that I'm developing I like to call vegan economics. So yeah, like I said, if you're interested in that stuff, please subscribe, and hopefully I'll be seeing you again, and thank you very much for watching my video.